President Franklin D. Roosevelt was quick to recognize the implications of dictators seizing power in Europe and Asia. He believed that if Britain fell and the Axis powers were victorious, freedom and democracy would be in danger everywhere. But many Americans didn't want anything to do with another war in Europe. In the 1930s, a majority of Americans believed that U.S. participation in World War I had been a mistake. Many believed that the country's involvement had been manipulated by big business. This popular belief gave rise to Senate hearings led by Senator Nye to investigate the role that businesses had played in the United States' decision to enter World War I. The hearings found that U.S. businesses had not conspired to trick the country into entering the war in order to make more money. But the hearings did expose that more than 1/4 of the top 100 corporations were doing business with Nazi Germany. We do not inquire into the use of the products, one chemical industry official stated. We are interested in selling them. To prevent the United States from being drawn into another war in Europe, Congress passed a series of Neutrality Acts. Roosevelt thought this ostrich-like legislation was wrong. He wanted the United States to help Britain defeat the Nazis without being drawn into the war. After Italy invaded Ethiopia and Japan invaded China in 1937, he made a stirring call to embargo or quarantine such aggressors. But those who wanted to stay neutral, called isolationists, continued to fight to keep the United States out of the conflict. After Hitler's conquest of France in June of 1940, FDR had to figure out how to help Great Britain without breaking the neutrality laws. In September 1940, during his campaign for an unprecedented third term as president, Roosevelt authorized the transfer of 50 old American destroyers to the British in exchange for a few Atlantic naval bases in the so-called Destroyers for Bases deal. Re-elected in 1940, FDR got around the law against aiding the Allies by lending rather than selling arms to Great Britain and convinced Congress to lay out $7 billion to cover the cost of his Lend-Lease program.
I ask this Congress for authority and for funds sufficient to manufacture additional munitions and war supplies of many kinds to be turned over to those nations which are now in actual war with aggressor nations.
Not surprisingly, the German Führer was less than pleased. Shipping arms to the Allies on whatever terms put the United States in the same position that the country had been in 25 years earlier, as a neutral supplier on the eve of World War I. In a sense, history was repeating itself. German U-boats once again went on the attack, and the United States vessels once again became the targets. When a U-boat sunk the U.S. destroyer Reuben James off Iceland, the United States neutrality went to the bottom with its crew. 2 weeks later, Congress voted to arm merchantmen, and the American people began to prepare themselves for another war.